Welcome, everyone. Hello, I'm Rania Batrice. I'm the Interim Executive Director of March for Science. And it's such a pleasure to be with you again today, our global science family. This is our inaugural episode of MFS News. It's going to be a weekly installment where we discuss current events through the lens of science advocacy. And that is going to mean a lot of different things, as you will very, very quickly see. We'll also provide some updates on our movement's progress and provide opportunities for supporters to get involved and ways to just jump in and help us keep this movement moving forward. It's my privilege to welcome my colleagues and friends, Lucky Tran and Cody Hankerson. Hey, guys.
Hey, how you doing? How you feeling, everyone?
Hanging in. And for those of you who are new to March for Science, Lucky is our managing director, who's a molecular biologist and amazing, amazing science communicator. And Cody is our organizing director, who's brought his incredible and extensive political organizing experience to March for Science to mobilize for our signature campaign in 2021. And I know a lot of you out there will remember him from our volunteer meetups that he's been facilitating and hosting. So welcome again, everybody. So glad to have you here. So excited to be with two of my favorite people, Lucky and Cody. It's always a good time. And just to kick us off, you know, it's not a secret. We just got through inauguration, thankfully without any incident, which I know a lot of us were concerned about and paying very close attention to after the horrible events and insurrection on January 6th. So very grateful that everything happened the way that it did, and you know, for the most part, COVID guidelines were adhered to, which was amazing. Who would have thought that we would have had to celebrate that in our federal government? But here we are. And you know, I've got all kinds of feelings about all kinds of things, but I felt, you know, I got a little emotional during some of the events that took place on the 20th, including you know, the historic nature of now Vice President Kamala Harris taking the oath of office, first woman, first Black woman, first South Asian woman. So all very exciting things that we all celebrated. And for me and for all of us, I know a lot of us, it's time to get back to work. But what about y'all? What stood out for you? Why don't we start with you, Lucky?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. Well, first of all, peaceful transition of power. I'd never valued it before, so hooray. Any event that has that is a success in my eyes, so that was great. Amanda Gorman's wonderful, wonderful poem just captured the spirit of the moment and of the nation. I thought that was wonderful. Shout out to Bernie memes and the mittens, and, you know, drop them in the comments, keep them coming. That was awesome. That actually, for me, so for as a press person, it was just right after the inauguration was really the highlight. I'm such like a comms geek, but first of all, to see the new press sec, Jen Psaki, step up to the podium and said, "We care about a free and independent press in our democracy. You know, we are here to serve the American people." That was such a relief for me. And then to see Fauci step up and say, you know, if we don't know the answer, we're not going to guess. We're going to tell you what the truth, and we're going to say we don't know the answer. And that he was feeling so liberated that now he can talk about facts and science and let the science speak. So that was just so wonderful. And the work is starting already. What about you, Cody? What stood out for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, y'all hit on it a lot, and I think that the word whenever I talk to everybody else is just normal. How I haven't watched a presidential event really, not intentionally, and not in a way that didn't make me just anxious in like the past like 4 years. And so I think that just having a ceremony that is as mundane and as normal as like an inauguration can be, it I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. And then also it was, I mean, I can't imagine how the advanced staffers for President Biden felt trying to put together an event while also dealing with Secret Service. And then huge shout out to all the National Guards men and women who were there on the ground trying to just make sure it was peaceful, which is such a low bar. But it was this awesome ceremony that was surrounded by all this turmoil of even the National Guard's troops being in the basement of the Capitol, trying to just make sure that no more violence occurred. And that is so wild to contrast, that once you watch it and you see everything going smoothly and as planned, you're just like, oh, finally it's just normal, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, I think one of my dear friends reminded me to stop and celebrate on the 20th. Because, of course, I know like so many of us is like, what's next? We have so much work to do. But to just stop and enjoy that moment and all the diversity that came along with it, which was so beautiful. I do wish we would have seen a land dedication ceremony, but that's just me. But aside from that, there was a lot of really intentional inclusion and lots of really wonderful things to pull from and just be inspired by. And like y'all both said, you know, I don't think any of us ever thought it would be such a big deal to have that peaceful transfer of power, to not have some horrendous event happen around inauguration. I remember in 2009, I was there for Obama's inauguration, and the biggest dramatic thing was that I don't even remember what it was. He'd misspoke or whatever and actually had to be sworn in the next day. And that was like the drama, right? And now we're in 2021 and we're like, wow, that was a cakewalk. So
yeah, glad it wasn't violent. Like, it's such a low bar. Yeah.
Totally. But speaking of those bars, we are getting right back to work, and Biden himself, actually, to his credit, on day one signed 17 executive orders. A lot of it was reversing some of the horrendous things that we have seen take place over the last 4 years, including rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement, which we can talk about that a little bit later. I know I've talked about it before on here. I still think that's kind of a baseline and not like the finish line, but a lot of really amazing things happened. So what were some of those executive orders? We're going to drop a link into the chat so folks can see all 17 of them. We're not going to cover all 17 of them because we'll all start waxing poetic and then we'll be here all night. But we're going to drop that in there so y'all can reference that. But what were some of the exciting points, some of the things that got reversed that you were really happy to see? Cody, why don't we start with you?
For sure. I know quite a few people personally that have been just so personally devastated by the pandemic and have been just struggling to survive. And so to see President Biden come in on the first day and say, not only like do we have a plan, and not only do we have all these things in place in a way that is transparent and is meaningful, but then to also see all the his statements about COVID relief. And for a lot of my friends who are on unemployment now, I'm an organizer. So a lot of my friends are in an economy where they just got off of trying to get the president elected or get a senator or congressperson elected, and then they fell into this unemployment gap. But on top of that, all the people who we were organizing with, all the communities that we were organizing in, all those people were also affected. And oftentimes our most dedicated volunteers were the people who were as hard hit by the pandemic as anybody else. And so seeing how far the president was willing to go to represent those communities was huge. And then also my wife is Mexican American, so not executive order, but seeing the bust of Cesar Chavez in the background of President Biden's new office it was pretty meaningful, I know, for a lot of us.
That's awesome. How about you, Lucky?
Yeah, I think from a personal point, we can go through a lot of them. From a personal point of view, definitely there were many on the immigration, like reversing a lot of the immigration bans and things like that. I'm a refugee, so like immigration is really something that is key and has traveled with my activism throughout my life. I know so many friends who were affected by the ban. I know people who were overseas when that ban happened, and I remember standing in JFK airport in the protests, having the news come in, and it's so relieving, right, to think that those orders have been reversed and we won't have that moment again right now. So obviously the fight is longer, we need to do more, but that was great. And as Cody mentioned, like the pandemic, so I was actually in my comms day job at Columbia this week, talking to lots of people at the NIH and the WHO, and they were like, the WHO people were so elated. I talked to them the day after the inauguration. They were so elated to have the US back. They were, like Fauci on TV, absolutely giddy. He addressed them and said, the US is back in, we're a partner, we want to see equitable distribution of the vaccine around the world. We're going to do this multilaterally, all the right things. And that was just so amazing to see. And I think overall, a lot of the things that happened, as you mentioned, the Paris Agreement, the Keystone Pipeline cancellation, that was a big victory for activists over years too. I've never seen so many, for our audience of science advocates, I've never seen so many executive orders focus on science before, and so much work get done in science policy and advocacy on day one. And I think it's really a testament. Obviously we are in crises, but it's a testament to this community here and all the work you've all done over the last few years. It's really amazing to see. And thank you for everyone for participating in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Such important things to call out. And also distinct reminders, I know I sort of touched on it before, of the work ahead as well. These are great first steps. But even as we discuss immigration, and there's been talk of pathway to citizenship, that actually has to get done. Even as we talk about the cancellation of the Keystone XL pipeline, we still have to talk about the Dakota Access Pipeline and the atrocities that are taking place through the continuation, and quite frankly, even it's operating illegally. We know that, and so there are all these things that it's sort of all of the great first steps. And we have elected a pro-science president and vice president. We have more allies in Congress now on that front as well, which is very, very exciting. But again, lots of these reminders of the work ahead. And that actually brings us sort of a little bit full circle to updating the organizing work, which Cody is doing such a phenomenal job leading. And maybe you can just jump in quickly, Cody, and tell us a little bit about what's next as we talk about the next things that have to get done. Our work is not done. I'll probably say it 100 more times, maybe 1,000 more times. We'll see. I don't know. Because it's important. We got more to do.
Yeah, and that is a huge part of it, is that now that the administration, the Biden administration, is moving forward, a huge part of our problem is going to be coming together as a community and tracking all of it in parallel. We can't just be hyper focused on our niches anymore, because it's not a survival thing, it's a growth. And we have to take advantage of this time and make sure that we're getting the policies enacted meaningfully, and not just, and although the executive orders that President Biden put through are so important and are huge steps to getting us where we want to go, we ultimately want to get all of that into legislation. And a big part of that is making sure that Congress works as well. So with the 4 pillars that we have, which are democracy, public health, climate, and then justice, the really big one that we've been focused on is still all of the impeachment process that Donald Trump is still going through, former President Trump, or his title. But we want to make sure that we don't blow over the fact that there was an insurrection in our capital less than 2 weeks ago, and that was heavily incited by a sitting U.S. president. And holding people accountable is, and I've seen this over and over again from multiple people, is holding people accountable is the first step to healing. And so in order for us to not only hold President Trump accountable in the Senate by pushing for a conviction, but also barring him from ever running for office, is a huge focus of our field program right now.
Absolutely. So important. And for over the last couple of years, I've really been trying to center love more in my work, which was, to be really honest and to tell on myself, was a bit of a foreign concept for me, because everything has been so aggressive for so long. But the thing that I keep saying to anybody who will listen is love is not the absence of justice. And we all want unity. We all want to come together. We all want to move forward. But we have to have accountability and justice. And those things can happen on parallel tracks. Please, some folks are already dropping in questions. We're going to get to those for sure. But please, if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat, and we'll be getting to those very, very soon. And yes, so before we get to questions, Cody, could you just talk a little bit about the next upcoming meetings that you are going to be hosting and facilitating?
For sure. So we have our 4 team meetings tomorrow. It's going to be noon, 1, 2, and 3 Central. And all these events are already up on our Facebook. You can go over and click the link and sign up. And if you don't feel like you know exactly which team you fit in, that's completely okay. We have field, research, data, and content. So field is more of our direct action. So those are our people who are going to be on not only social media, but also writing postcards to senators and to elected representatives, and then also reaching out to other scientific organizations and asking them to join in with us in this movement, in this stance that we say, hey, although we may just start to fade off as far as attention in the media, we really need to focus and make sure that we send a message to every other elected official ever that inciting an insurrection is just unacceptable, and that it not only endangers the country, but they're in all of the scientific communities within that country. So trying to keep focus and trying to keep that pressure and trying to keep the news up is going to be a huge push of our field program. On the data and research sides, so although that may seem redundant, data is going to be really focused on, again, we're tracking a lot of information. Trying to track where 535 different members of Congress are is a huge task. And so what we want to do is make sure that if a congressperson changes their stance, that we're able to see that in real time. So if you feel, even though you're in a very safe blue district or a very hard red district, you still have so much to contribute to, because you just tracking your local politics is going to matter so much, especially when votes could come down to 17 senators. So that's going to be a huge push from our field data side. The research side is that we still have 3 other core objectives. We still have climate, public health, and justice. One of the things that I saw on our Facebook group was that although this is the 2nd day of the Biden administration, Flint, Michigan still needs to be taken care of. So, I mean, there are a lot of scientific justice issues that we still need to highlight and we still need to address. And again, these things have to happen in parallel. Things aren't getting any easier just because you're not in the news cycle or because somebody's not paying attention to your story. So the last part of that aspect is the content team, which are our creators, our graphic designers, our videographers, our musicians. And this is a huge need that we have right now, is for even if you feel like, oh, I don't have a portfolio, or I don't do this professionally, if you've ever created a meme, we want you to come to our meeting tomorrow. It's at 3 p.m. Central. And that's the only way that we really are able to communicate all the science. And Lucky knows this, is if, although you could have the best thesis and you could have all the best information, it could be completely true, if you don't speak to people in terms that they can understand and in mediums that they can understand, then sometimes you're just speaking for yourself. You did that paper for yourself. And so all of these teams are going to be coming together and then focusing on different campaigns throughout our different categories. So that's what we're focused on. It's a lot. There are a lot of moving parts. It's a lot more broken down in each of our meetings. But we really hope that you'll be there. And the link to join those meetings is going to be in the description or on our March for Science Facebook page.
And you hit some. Danielle said we need to keep it up and communicate science in layman's terms so that general population starts to catch up, which is exactly what Cody was talking about. And one of the main goals of March for Science is to reach people where they are, and be able to communicate in ways that make sense in in multiple spaces, right? We can't just sort of like force feed facts and figures down people's throats. We really, really want to help connect the dots. And that includes all these buckets that Cody was talking about. So it might be very easy to say, what does justice have to do with science? And we are of the belief that you can't decouple these things. You can't talk about justice without science. You can't talk about science without justice. Whether it is the Flint water crisis, whether we're talking about infrastructure, whether we're talking about climate, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many different places that you just can't, it might not seem obvious at first. Same thing with democracy. Public health may be a little bit more obvious, but there are these different places that might not seem so obvious, but we really, really want to try to bring folks together to have this conversation in very clear ways, in very safe spaces, so people can ask questions, and we're communicating in ways that make sense, like I said, across broad spectrums. So Danielle, thank you for your question or your comment, actually.
And Rania, if I may, one of the things that I definitely fall victim to is that a lot of us are slams. Like Rania hasn't taken a break in like 4 months. I don't even know if she sleeps. So a huge help that you can bring into the March for Science community is making sure that if you have a local issue, or if you know something in your community that's going on, we're as subjects to the news cycle as anybody else. And there are so many different issues that we need to be tracking in each of these different categories, that if something is incredibly important to your community, let us help you get that into a higher platform. Help us make sure that gets in front of a reporter, and then maybe you can tell your community story, or somebody else in there can. So those kind of things are extremely beneficial. Everybody can contribute.
Absolutely. Such a good point. Thank you, Cody. I want to pop over to Lucky, but real quick before I do, Gail says, what's the plan for Earth Day this year? Last year, everything was canceled. Actually, last year, everything wasn't canceled. We had a lot of great virtual content last year, but that's okay. Obviously, we are a science advocacy organization, so we are very much centering public health policies and safety, and we will continue to do so. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic. We see great strides being taken and great steps being taken. Lucky talked about Dr. Fauci, which, like, aside from the Bernie memes, maybe the second most exciting thing that has come out after inauguration.
The relief on his face during those press conferences.
Absolutely. Yeah. So all of that being said, we are going to be announcing, we will be having virtual content again. We'll be announcing that in the coming weeks. But please stay tuned, because last year was really fantastic, and no doubt this year will be really fantastic as well, but it will be virtual because we are all still trying to stay safe and healthy for ourselves and each other. But actually, I want to come back to Lucky, because we were talking about science communication, which is such a big thing, a big part of what you do. And you are a scientist. You're the smart person in the room who then is able to communicate it out into the world. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that process and how you see us moving forward. We still have to kind of contend with science denying. It's not like that just poof disappeared, but we do, like I mentioned before, we have more allies now. So what does this look like as we kind of move forward in this space?
Sure. This can be a very sort of long and big question. It's a wonderful question. It's something I work on all the time. So I love this question. And it can go a million different ways. Actually, I do want to pick on something that Cody said on the content creation team. People might wonder why we post a lot of memes for a science group. It sort of seems strange, right? But there is a theory behind this, and also political theory. Actually, Naomi Klein wrote a great article in The Intercept about the Bernie memes today and what it might mean. Go read that if you can. So there is theory, but really the way I like to frame it is that, people like politics and science are very interesting, but we're not in those spheres all the time. A place that we're always in is the internet and in culture, popular culture. And so you need to go where people are. And so if you can translate concepts And memes are great for, communicating political ideas, scientific ideas through popular culture. They're often the most effective things. They get shared everywhere. It starts a discussion. It's not a peer-reviewed paper where you're going to find out all the details there. It's a starting point, but you need that starting point. If you don't have that starting point, you're never going to get through. And I think this is one of the broader problems that we've had with the internet, is I don't think we've thought about it strategically enough. And we've had all of these people going into these micro communities and niches because we haven't really tried to meet them where they are through those tactics. So I think that's important. One other thing that's also important is who is doing the science communication is important. I think traditionally a big problem we've had is typically, and Dr. Fauci is great, but he can't be the only one, right? Bill Nye is great. He can't be the only one. We can't only have white male scientists doing this stuff. And I think my thing with this year, with the popular support for science and all of our tasks at hand, is that we all need to become science communicators. And I'm not even talking about if you have a PhD in science. I mean, anyone who cares and loves and wants science to be better needs to do it. And I think particularly with the vaccine rollout, I think that's super important, because in terms of building trust, it's not going to be some distant scientist who's, sitting in Washington. It's going to be a member of your community telling them why they're getting the vaccine to protect themselves and everyone around them, right? It's people who look like you, who, live with you, who work with you. And so that's a big project that we're working on, is vaccine communication. And we would love all of you to join and become vaccine boosters and, be ambassador for the vaccine in your community, because we all really need to do this work right now. And I guess the last thing I do want to say on this topic is that I think there is an instinctual feeling to say, when we see a lot of science denial, that the only thing that we can do is we always got to communicate better. And I think that's a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And I think what makes March for Science great is we pair both, community organizing, political action, and science communication. So all those things work together. As you see, you can do all the science communication you want, but if you're going to get censored or someone's not going to let you take to the podium, then, you're not going to get policies, or you're not going to get people really wearing a mask. Wearing a mask can become political if you have the wrong leaders there. And so that's why we do both. We're always engaged in the political side. And as you saw with Dr. Fauci, he's, lost 10 years. He looks 10 years younger. He's got a glow because now he has a government who will let him speak and let the science speak. So the political side always matters alongside the science communication.
Absolutely. Such an important point, because, and while we appreciate and understand where the questions come from, like just focus on science, we get it. We absolutely understand. However, we can't, if we aren't putting the right people in places that, and this is not to say every person that we've, spoken out in favor of, or any, that's not to say they're all perfect. So many of them need to be pushed as well, but at least we can have a conversation with them. And that is massively important, because just like Lucky said, when masks became political, that didn't happen on accident. And holy crap, is there anything anyone in the world ever thought would be less political than a mask? I didn't. Call me nuts here, but that is just not something I ever thought I would even have to consider. And I know we've talked about this before. Lucky, you and I have talked about it specifically, that so many of my friends who are scientists and researchers especially, they just want to do the work. They just want to do the research and report their findings. And there's been such an understanding that, quite frankly, even before Donald Trump was ever elected, there has been this sort of attack on science and less funding and less priority and things like that. It's not a new thing. And so as much as we all want you to be able to do the work too, there's other work alongside it that folks like me, who are obsessed with science but are not scientists, want to help with. But we need your help as well. So this is our lovely community here, and we will be launching some more series, including around vaccines, because as Lucky said, hugely, massively important that we're communicating in fact and clearly, and having the tough conversations of why do Black and Brown communities have an aversion to the idea of taking a vaccine. That is real. We have to have those conversations. We have to name them. And we were on a call earlier today where somebody far smarter than me was talking about how we can't pretend like there are no negative side effects sometimes with vaccines. There are in all vaccines. And when you're talking about 300 million vaccinations ish across the country, there's going to be some of that, but we have to speak about it honestly and clearly, and not sort of shy away and turn it into something that it's not. So we will be covering all of these issues and more alongside Lucky and Cody and really amazing special guests. And we're just very excited to have you all join us and jump in with us. And before we go out, Cody, why don't you tell our viewers one more time where they can join you tomorrow for those very important meetings. And by the way, Cody is such a phenomenal facilitator. Sometimes these things are painful. Cody makes it magical and wonderful. So
I have a 45-minute rule. So like, yeah, none of our Zoom calls will go longer than 45 minutes. And it's a guarantee because I know that y'all are all busy. But yeah, so you can meet us tomorrow. I'm going to be hosting Zooms. So at noon is our field team, and that's going to be focused more on that direct action side. So if you want to be able to contact your senator or make sure that your senator is on the right track for the impeachment trial, again, we're looking for 17 senators that are going to be able to cross the aisle and then make a difference. So especially if you're from a toss-up state like that, that's a huge thing that you can do. But also, even if you're not from a toss-up state, going and boosting that message and making sure that people don't forget exactly why we're doing this. And this is going to be something that's hard to make sure that we focus. And over these 2 weeks, making sure that we keep in mind what we're trying to avoid and why we're doing this is going to be super important. And then data is going to be at 1, and that is also very important, helping us track, especially if you're busy. Data is something that is a team that you can participate in at 1 a.m. If like you're just getting out of your lab, you just got done with like running samples and you're like, I have 30 minutes to volunteer and help with this movement. Perfect, data's for you. Same thing with research, especially if you're from a position or a lab that you're not necessarily able to be politically active. Help just come over and contribute your expertise, contribute your views. There are a lot of times, I only graduated with my degree in biology. I can't always spot off top like misinformation, but maybe your specific field is something that has been discussed over and over again on some backroom channel that we need to see and need to address as a community as far as misinformation goes. And then wrapping all that up, again, a huge need is trying to bring all that information into a format that is digestible. So if you're a graphic designer and you're really passionate about science or you have never really dived into the scientific community and you're like, well, I don't know anything about science, but like I know how to use Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Premiere, or I know how to use like Procreate. All these different ways are huge ways that you can help. Even doing a 10-second animation is an enormous help for a large movement like this. And we're very small right now. So those are all really ways. Another really important contribution that you can make, especially, or for really all the members of these teams, and maybe in the comments, is just letting us know, again, what you're seeing on the ground. That helps us not only create content, that helps us communicate like Lucky, but also helps our content team and our research team know what topics we need to address. We're a very small team. And so commenting and letting us know what are those conversations that you're having with a friend that was like skeptical about getting a vaccine? What kind of questions have you been running into? And you'd be like, oh yeah, I don't know. Or I'm curious about this, or I'm hesitant for this reason. These kind of topics, these kind of conversations are going to be really, really important and things that we want to address, and why it's so important that you come to these types of meetings is so that we can have those conversations. So with that said, I'm really excited to see all y'all tomorrow.
Awesome. Please do join if you can, one or all. Like I said, Cody's a fantastic facilitator. Lucky, Cody, so great to be with y'all always. Makes my day. And to our viewing audience out there, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back again soon.